Hey guys, welcome to Forming Questions, your favorite topic in English class. I'm like dying laughing inside because I know that some of you guys are super traumados with this tema, with this theme. So I'm thinking to myself, like, what are your faces going to be like when you see it on the first week of homework? De nuevo, on the first day, more than likely, de nuevo, on forming questions. Okay, here's the thing. I did some self-reflecting. So instead of me like bullying you guys, like, Puchika, why didn't your questions make sense sometimes? I'm thinking that the formulas were messing you up more than helping you because um, it almost looked like you were so focused on trying to fit into the formula that you weren't checking that it had sentido afterward, that it made a lot of sense. So I'm just going to break it down really easily without formulas, just giving you some tips and pointers on how to make questions, because obviously in English there's a lot of like exceptions and stuff like that to things. So we're going to break it down again to the three parts, right? Normal questions, yes and no questions, and negative questions, just so that you keep them in their compartments and organized. But we're throwing out formulas and we're going more with sentido and some advice, okay? You do not need to take notes for this section because I printed the notes out for you from the PowerPoint. You have those in your binder so you can refer to them when you do the activity. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, let's talk first of all about what a normal question is. Okay, a normal question is a question that requires more than a one-word answer or a yes or no answer. I mean, it can be a one-word answer that's not yes or no, but it's going to be a little bit more elaborate than that. So it's not going to be a yes or no question, and it's also not going to be anything that contains a negative in it, okay? So it's just your general questions. These are the questions. Number one, you need to remember that more than likely start with a question word. So your what, who, where, why, how, which, your normal question words. So like, take for instance the very first example. Broadleaf trees are referred to as hardwoods. How are we going to change that sentence into a question using the question word that you see up there? Why? Okay, so like I said, the first thing that you need to remember about normal questions is that they start with question words. The second thing that you need to remember about normal questions is that they probably have to invert the order of the sentence. Most likely they have to invert the order of the sentence. What do I mean? Well, sentences are subject, verb, complete thought, right? In questions, it's verb, subject, complete thought. Like, look at example 1. I'm going to show you what it looks like. Why are broadleaf trees referred to as hardwoods? Okay. Why is the question word, are is the verb part of it, right? So when there's a verb phrase, part of it is going to start in the verb subject order. So that's your inversion. Why are broadleaf trees referred to as hardwoods? Now you wouldn't do the whole verb phrase. You wouldn't say, why are referred broadleaf trees to hardwoods? No, 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 no. And that's where I think that you guys got stuck because you were like, oh, that's what the formula says, right? But no, it's just, think about it. It has to have sentido as well. So you're starting with the question word, inverting the order. Look at the next one and try to do it before I give you the answer. There are 4 differences between dicots and monocots. Think about it. There's 2 different ways to do this one. I'm going to give you a hint on that. One where you take out the word there and one where you leave the word there in it. And I'm going to show you both ways. I'm going to at least say both ways. But see if you can figure it out. Okay, I'm going to show it to you. Remember, question word, invert order. This is the most common way to say it. What are the 4 differences between dicots, and monocots, right? What is the question word? Are is the verb. Differences is the subject. What word do we leave out? There. So the other way that you could say that is what 4 differences are there between dicots and monocots? That's an exception, and it's not as common. But just to let you know that if you do hear that, it's not wrong. Okay, let's keep practicing. Okay, here's another example, different question word, same pattern. Taproot systems are different from fibrous root systems. Use the question word how. Try it in your head. Okay, let me show you. How are taproot systems different from fibrous root systems? Question word, verb, rest of the sentence, right? Okay, let's look at the next one. The broadleaf trees and the evergreen trees grow faster than some sycamore trees. Now be careful on this one because it's which, so it has to have sentido. The sentence says the broadleaf trees and the sycamore trees grow faster than, the broadleaf trees and the evergreen trees go faster than sycamore trees. This one you want to ask which. I'm going to give you a hint with the which. Which is going to have one word that's part of the subject before you do that verb. Let me show you. Which trees grow faster than the sycamore trees? So I hope you guys weren't like, oh, how am I supposed to put all those trees in that question? No. The answer is the broadleaf trees and the evergreen trees. So the question is which trees, so you have to have trees in there because you can say which grow faster. If the person already knows what you're talking about, you can say which grows faster. But here we're specifying, so you have to put that word trees in there. Which trees grow faster than the sycamore trees? So again, here's an exception to where you have to put part of the subject before your verb. Okay? So the formulas aren't helping us. That's fine. We threw those away. But now we know that this question has sentido. Okay, let's move on to yes and no questions. So again, just to remember about normal questions, start with a question word, usually invert the order of the subject and the verb to verb subject, okay, after the question word. Okay, now we're going to yes and no questions, where obviously the questions just require a yes or a no. They might get another explanation, but that's what you're looking for, is either a yes or a no. These questions do not need question words. They just need to begin with their helping verb most of the time, okay? So just remember that. That's the biggest difference. They're already inverting the order as well with the verb because the verb is going in front to form the question, okay? This is what I mean. Look at the first one. He is 12 years old. That's the answer. Now, how would you ask that? He is 12 years old. Put the helping verb in front, then the subject. Is he 12 years old? Easy, right? You can't say, he is 12 years old. That would be the Spanish way to do a sentence, right? You just inflect your voice at the end. You have that voice inflection, and then all of a sudden it's a sentence. But no, in English, what do you have to do? Put the helping verb in front, then the subject. Is he 12 years old? Okay, next one. John is running in the marathon. Not, John is running in the marathon? No. How would you say that? Is John running in the marathon? Okay, easy, easy. Let's keep going. Okay, because yes and no questions are so easy, you might be thinking, we don't need to keep practicing, Miss Jessica, I'm just going to turn this off. No, not yet. Don't do it. Because there's 2 sentences on this page that don't even have a helping verb to help you make your questions. So what are you going to do? I'm going to teach you, okay? So look at the first one. Bill can pass the test. Now this is easy. It has a helping verb. What is it? Can. Okay, so look, this one's easy. Bill can pass the test. Bill can pass the test? No. How are you going to say that? Tell me. I can't hear you. Just kidding. Okay, let's see what it is. Can Bill pass the test? Boom, done. Okay, but look at the next one. You stand here every morning waiting for the bus. You cannot ask them, like I told you. You stand here every morning? No, what are you going to do? There is a special word. See if anybody remembers what it is. There is a special word to put in a sentence to form a question when there is no question forming word already there. And it's not one of your question words. Anybody know the word? 2 letters in the present form. Do. Do, guys. If you don't have a word to form your question, use do or a form of do. Do or does, right? Like, does your mom like this? Because you can't say, do your mom like this, because it has to be compatible and with subject-verb agreement, right? Does your mom like this? So what is this one going to be? Look at it, and then I'm going to show you the answer. Do you stand here every morning waiting for the bus? Okay, do you stand here? Then look at the last one on this page. Monique owned that house. Now it's in past tense, and we need to make it into a question, and it doesn't have a helping verb to help us. So, how are you going to form this? You can't, please don't say, do Monique own that house? Normally you would say, does Monique own that house? But in this case, because it's past, what would you do? I'll show you. Did Monique own that house? Okay, did Monique own that house? Okay, so look over those for a second. Okay, and then let me show you a trick that this will work for most questions. How can you check that you're doing it correctly? When you look at your question, invert it back into a sentence and make sure that it makes sense. Like, for example, look at the top one. Can Bill pass the test? Invert it to make it into a sentence. Invert the subject and the verb back again. That there's a subject and then a verb. Bill can pass the test. Does that sentence make sense? Yes, it does, right? Look at the next one. Do you stand here every morning waiting for the bus? You do stand here every morning waiting for the bus. Invert it again. Subject, verb. You do stand here every morning waiting for the bus. Does that make sense? Good, then you wrote your question correctly. Look at the last one. Did Monique own that house? Subject, verb. Switch it around again. Monique did own that house. Does that work? Of course it does. Okay, so you wrote your question correctly. So anytime you want to make sure, does it have sense to you? I don't know. I mean, to me, it sounds like it has sense to you. Ms. Jessica keeps saying to make sure it has sense to you. I think it does have sense to you. Invert it back. Take it from verb to subject. Put it back to subject, verb, and make sure that it makes sense. Now, the ones with the normal questions, do the same thing. Take out your question word. It's gone. Invert the subject and verb back to where it's supposed to be and read the sentence and make sure that it makes sense. And that will tell you whether or not it has sense to you. Okay, guys, so now you know normal questions, form with a question word, don't forget to invert. Yes and no questions don't need a question word, but they need a helping verb that you use do, does, or did, some form of do to form that question if there is no helping verb to help you. Now we are on negative questions, the last type of questions that we're going to use to form our base in trying to form all types of questions, okay? Negative questions also use forms of do, does, or did, okay? Because what you're going to find a lot of times in English, if you're going to get down to like the super minute reglas of going from a Spanish speaker to an English speaker, we know that do has the translation, guys, of hacer. We know that. But do, if you have noticed in your writing, also is used for forming negatives and for forming questions, okay? Negatives and questions where it's a word that doesn't actually have a translation, okay? It's an English word that we need to form our sentences, okay? But it's silent in the translation of Spanish. When you're translating and trying to translate from word to word, it does not have a literal translation, okay? Also an emphasis, like I can say like, I cleaned my room. Or if you want to emphasize, you can say, I did clean my room, or I do that, right? So emphasis, negatives, questions, and emphasis. So when you see negative questions, obviously we're going to use do in this one as well. But don't forget that it is your verb. You're going to see that right now. Look what it says right here. Form a question from you do not understand the math problem. Okay, guys, remember from before. And if you don't remember from before, you'll know now. When you're forming negative questions, there's two forms. You can use the do not right there, or you can change it to a contraction don't. And we're going to talk about the difference between the two in negative questions right after I show you this example. So if you wanted to form it with the don't, I'll show you what it looks like. Don't you understand the math problem? Okay, don't is being used as our helping verb there, so you have the verb subject inversion that we need. Don't you? Okay, and then you have the next part of the verb phrase, understand. Don't you understand the math problem? Or if you're going to use do you not understand? You're going to have to separate the do and the not to put the you in between it. Okay, the subject in between it. And then remember, invert it back to make sure that it makes sense, to assure yourself that you're doing your question correctly. Look at the first one. You don't understand the math problem. You do not understand the math problem. Okay, that's where you put it back to the inversion for a sentence, and it makes sense. So you probably did your question just fine. Okay, so just make sure that you remember you can do it with a contraction and with a do not. Now listen to those sentences again. Don't you understand the math problem? Do you not understand the math problem? We say that most of the time when you are speaking, you're going to use a contraction, but listen to that contraction. Don't you understand the math problem? Is that respectful? Honestly, it's like not respectful, you guys. So in this case, if you're trying to speak to somebody to help them, like let's say a teacher or a compañero, we should not say, okay, you know, all of us out of impatience one day will say it, don't you understand the math problem? But we should say, do you not understand this math problem? Like, do you need some help with that? Okay, so that's how you could use that negative question. Let's keep practicing. Okay, here we go. Here's the next one that we can practice on. She does not have friends to help her. How would you change that into a contraction and a does not? Try it in your head. Okay, stop the video if you need to, but I'm going to move on. Okay, let's look at what it says. Doesn't she have friends to help her? Put the contraction in front. Then the rest of it follows. Doesn't she have friends to help her? Or does she not? She goes in between that verb, that phrase with the negative. Does she not have friends to help her? Now, depending on the tone, obviously both can be rude or both can be nice, but really in this case again, doesn't she have friends to help her? That doesn't sound very patient. Does she not have friends to help her? Can be used a little bit more patiently. Can also be used impatiently, so be careful with your tone and your inflection of your voice, okay? Let's keep going. Woohoo, you guys. I'm all like, let's keep going. And we're done. Okay, it just says right here, do not forget to check if it makes sense by saying it to yourself as a sentence. Okay, take that question, put it back as a sentence, and make sure it still has sentido, okay? Other things you can do to kind of improve on making sure that your sentences make sense are read carefully the formation of your sentences in your other tareas. Like you're gonna have sentences for reading comprehension, you have sentences for biology, you'll have sentences for economics, you'll have sentences for all different other subjects, and so look at how they're formed because they're formed correctly in those books, and then follow those patterns to make your sentences correct. Okay, you're going to get practice by doing the sheet that's included in your binder for today's lesson, and also you're going to get practice because there's going to be a lot of reading assignments that I'm going to give you, or taking note assignments where you're going to have to make quizzes. And on those quizzes, you guys, you're going to, like we did kind of a little bit in the fourth parcial, where you make the own quizzes. Like if you were the teacher and you were giving us a quiz, what would be the questions that you ask, right? And I'll explain those when it comes to the assignment. But what's going to happen on those, you guys, is you're going to get graded for that class for the questions that you do, but you're also going to get graded for English for how you're forming those questions and following the rules that I gave you so that you're doing them correctly. Because like I said before, the reason why that we're practicing this so much is because I've heard you guys speak English, and when you come to want to ask a question, you start to really fumble around in your words, like, oh, I don't know if I want to ask it. Never mind, I'm not going to say it, because you're not confident in how you form your questions. So keep practicing, keep the rules in mind, forget the formulas, they didn't work, okay, but keep the rules in mind so that we can practice well. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see 100% on those assignments. Let me know if you have any questions.